Hi everyone, my name is Daniel, and today we are going to dive into a chilling and heartbreaking case that shocked an entire community. Sophie Miller first crossed paths with Ethan Cole back in middle school. At the time, they were nothing more than classmates, their connection distant and fleeting. But fate has a strange way of weaving people together. Years later, when both Sophie and Ethan had turned 26, Ethan suddenly reached out through Instagram after years of silence. Curious and caught off guard, Sophie accepted his request. What began as a simple exchange of likes and comments soon grew into long chats and late-night conversations. Ethan scrolled through Sophie's posts, one after another, liking every picture as though he had rediscovered someone he should never have let slip away. Something about her drew him in, deeper with every passing day. Within weeks, they were talking constantly. Phone calls, text messages, even video calls filled with laughter. They bonded over their shared love of Harry Potter, fantasy novels, Star Wars marathons, and everything nerdy. What surprised Sophie the most was not just Ethan's sense of humor, but his devotion to his faith. Sophie had grown up in a Christian household, where her family's faith was the foundation of their lives. For her, it mattered more than anything else that her future partner shared that belief. Ethan seemed to fit perfectly into that picture. He quoted scripture with ease, prayed with her, and gave her the comfort of knowing that their values were aligned. To the outside world, Ethan and Sophie appeared to be the perfect couple. Their photos together captured endless smiles and laughter, and their friends described them as soulmates who had finally found each other. It wasn't long before Ethan decided to propose. But Sophie's father, Michael Miller, a deeply protective man, wasn't so easily convinced. He had always kept a close watch over his daughter, and when Ethan appeared so suddenly back in her life, his protective instincts stirred. Sophie, however, reassured her father and told him she truly believed Ethan was the one. When their engagement party arrived, Sophie wore a beautiful white dress, glowing with excitement. But that night, an uneasy tension crept into the air. Ethan's mother appeared at the party dressed in white too, a gesture everyone in the room saw as disrespectful towards Sophie. It was a silent statement that she didn't approve of her son's choice. Later, Sophie confronted Ethan about his mother's behavior, but Ethan brushed it off, saying he had grown up mostly with his grandparents and had never been close to his parents. What his mother thought, he claimed, didn't matter to him at all. Shortly after their engagement, the couple relocated to Raleigh, North Carolina in 2016, ready to start a new life together. Ethan secured a job at a home care company, and within months, he was recognized as Employee of the Month. Sophie couldn't have been more proud. But her pride wasn't just about Ethan. She herself worked tirelessly, sometimes juggling 3 or even 4 jobs on top of her full-time role at a Fortune 500 company. She babysat children, she worked at her church nursery on Sundays, and she even ran a small candle-making business on the side. Sophie dreamed of one day owning her own store, one that gave her the financial independence she always wanted. She poured her energy into building something lasting, not just for herself, but for the life she was building with Ethan. Every Tuesday night, the couple joined Sophie's family for game night. Laughter, food, and board games filled those evenings. Ethan showed up on time every week, smiling warmly as he blended into Sophie's family circle. He seemed eager to belong. By November of 2016, their wedding day finally arrived. The ceremony was in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and it was everything Sophie had dreamed of. Friends still remembered the quirky touch the groomsmen brought to the event. Dressed sharply in suits, each carried a lightsaber, turning the wedding into a playful Star Wars-themed celebration. It was lighthearted, romantic, and unforgettable. But what no one at that wedding knew was that beneath the smiles, cracks were already beginning to form. After the wedding, Sophie and Ethan settled into married life with all the excitement and optimism of a young couple. But behind the closed doors of their small apartment in Raleigh, things weren't as picture-perfect as they appeared on social media. At first, Ethan seemed deeply supportive of Sophie's ambitions. He encouraged her to sell her handmade candles online and proudly showed off her work to friends. But as time went on, Sophie noticed something troubling. Ethan didn't seem interested in pursuing his own dreams. He worked his 9-to-5 job faithfully, but beyond that, he lacked motivation. Sophie, on the other hand, was a powerhouse. She'd wake up early, go to work at the Fortune 500 company, rush home to babysit in the evenings, and still spend late nights pouring wax and packing candle orders. She was determined to build a future, a stable and independent one. The imbalance between them grew more obvious with time. Friends began to notice Sophie was always exhausted, while Ethan often appeared carefree, sometimes even careless. Then came the first real argument. One night, Sophie returned home after a 14-hour workday. She found Ethan lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Their apartment was messy, dishes piled high in the sink. Sophie, drained and frustrated, asked why he hadn't helped with anything. Ethan's response stunned her. He brushed her off with a smirk and said, "Relax, you worry too much. I had a long day too. You're overreacting." It wasn't just the words that cut her. It was the dismissive tone, the coldness in his eyes. Sophie suddenly realized that the man she thought was her equal partner didn't see her struggles at all. Still, Sophie pushed through. She told herself every marriage had bumps in the road. And besides, their Tuesday family game nights with her parents and siblings still brought her joy. Ethan continued to attend those nights, smiling politely, blending in. To Sophie's family, he was still the charming son-in-law. But Sophie's father, Michael, began noticing things. Ethan seemed overly polished in public, almost too perfect. Yet there were moments when Michael caught a distant look in his eyes, as if he was hiding something. Then whispers began to reach Sophie. A friend casually mentioned seeing Ethan at a coffee shop with another woman. At first, Sophie laughed it off, saying Ethan probably met a coworker. But the thought lingered. One evening, while Ethan was in the shower, Sophie's curiosity got the better of her. She unlocked his phone, her hands trembling. What she found would change everything. Messages. Dozens of them. Some flirtatious, others downright explicit. Different women, different conversations, all hidden behind passwords and deleted apps. Sophie felt her world collapse in an instant. The man who prayed with her, the man who quoted scripture, the man she believed God had placed in her life, had betrayed her in the worst way possible. She sat in silence that night, staring at her wedding ring, a symbol that now felt more like a chain. But what Sophie didn't know yet was that this betrayal was just the beginning. Ethan wasn't only hiding affairs. His secrets ran deeper, far darker than she could have ever imagined. The night Sophie discovered the messages, she could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's smiling face at the altar, promising her loyalty, promising her faithfulness. How could the same man be whispering sweet lies to so many others? For days, Sophie kept the secret to herself. She went to work, babysat the twins, poured her candles, all with a mask of calm. But inside, she was unraveling. Finally, she confided in her best friend, Clara. Clara had known Sophie since college, and when she heard the truth, her face hardened. "Sophie," she whispered, "this isn't just flirting. This is a pattern. You need to be careful. Men who lie like this, they often hide more than one thing." Clara's warning echoed in Sophie's head. She began watching Ethan more closely. His late nights at the office, his sudden business trips that never had receipts, his constant secrecy with his phone. One afternoon, while Ethan was at work, Sophie sat at his desk, searching for answers. She opened his laptop, typed in the password she'd seen him use 100 times, and froze. Buried in a hidden folder were files, dozens of documents, bank statements under names Sophie didn't recognize, transfers to accounts overseas, and then the most chilling of all, photographs. Not of women, not of affairs, but of cash. Stacks of it. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sophie's hands shook as she scrolled. What was Ethan involved in? Why would her husband, the man who claimed to be living a modest 9-to-5 life, have access to that kind of money? When Ethan returned home that evening, Sophie studied him carefully. He kissed her cheek, dropped his bag by the door, and turned on the TV as if nothing was wrong. But Sophie saw it now. The charm, the smoothness, the mask. He was hiding something far bigger than infidelity. That night, Sophie whispered a silent prayer. God, show me the truth, please, before it's too late. The answer came faster than she expected. A week later, her father, Michael, received a call from an old friend in law enforcement, a friend who worked with federal investigations. Michael, I don't know how to tell you this, but Ethan's name has come up in our files. He isn't who he says he is. Sophie's perfect husband, the man who charmed her family, the man who prayed with her, was living a double life, and the FBI was already watching him.
The night her father told her about the FBI, Sophie felt the ground slip beneath her feet. For years, she believed Ethan was a simple, hard-working man, but now the mask was cracking, and behind it stood someone she barely recognized. Michael urged his daughter to stay quiet. Do not confront him, Sophie, he warned. If the feds are building a case, you could be in danger. But Sophie could not hold the storm inside her. One evening, as Ethan returned home, she stared at him with trembling eyes. "Who are you really, Ethan?" she whispered. He froze for just a second, then smiled as if he had rehearsed this moment his whole life. "I'm your husband, Sophie. Nothing more, nothing less." But Sophie had seen the files, the accounts, the photographs of money that could never be explained by his paycheck. She pressed harder. "Why is the FBI watching you? Why are you living a life I don't know about?" For the first time, Ethan's charm slipped. His jaw tightened, his eyes turned cold, and in that silence, Sophie realized she had married a stranger. Days turned into weeks. Sophie lived in quiet dread, watching Ethan carefully, never revealing what she knew. Meanwhile, federal agents in plain clothes started showing up around town, watching, tracking, waiting for Ethan to make his next move. Then one morning, it happened. Ethan kissed Sophie goodbye, said he was off to work, and never returned. Hours later, news broke in Raleigh. A raid. A network of financial fraud and money laundering exposed. At the center of it all, Ethan Miller, the man Sophie thought she knew. The community was stunned. Friends, neighbors, even church members refused to believe it. How could the charming, polite man they had welcomed into their homes be capable of orchestrating such crimes? But Sophie knew. She remembered the dismissive smirk when she asked for help, the lies layered one after another, the charm that now looked like nothing more than a weapon. In the weeks that followed, Sophie sat in her parents' living room, ringless hands clasped, staring at the floor, as federal agents explained how long Ethan had been under investigation. He had been building a false life years before he ever met her. The marriage, the prayers, the smiles, it was all part of his disguise. And yet the deepest wound for Sophie was not the fraud, not even the FBI file. It was the betrayal of trust, the realization that love itself had been weaponized against her. After Ethan's arrest, life moved in slow motion for Sophie. The world she thought she had built with love and faith lay in ruins. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse, whispering headlines about fraud, betrayal, and a man who fooled even the FBI. But inside her parents' home, Sophie found refuge. Her mother held her close every night when the silence became too heavy. Her father, Michael, reminded her that trust, once broken, does not mean her own worth was diminished. The divorce was swift. Ethan attempted to call from prison, but Sophie refused to answer. She knew every word he spoke would only be another lie, another performance. Months passed. Sophie poured herself back into her work, her candle business, her family. Slowly, she began to heal. She realized that the betrayal had not destroyed her. It had revealed her strength. One evening, Sophie sat on the porch of her childhood home, watching the sunset. For the first time in years, she felt peace. The chapter with Ethan was closed. Yes, he had fooled her family, fooled her friends, even fooled the FBI, but he could not destroy her spirit. And so, Sophie's story became more than just a cautionary tale about betrayal. It became a testament to resilience, to the truth that even when darkness hides behind a smiling face, light will always return. As Sophie whispered to herself that night, "I was fooled once, but never again."